Hi, my name is Kathy Johnson and I'm from Wilsonville, Oregon, and I'm going to tie the Lithuanian bat today. We need probably approximately a size 4 hook because they're a fairly large fly. They're good flies for bass fishing, for steelhead fishing. I'm going to use cross-cut rabbit and rabbit strips. You cut the first strip as long as the hook is, and it is the tail. Wrap your thread from the eye back so that it secures and nothing slips. Tie in the strip for the tail. This is a leech pattern. Next, we're going to do the cross-cut rabbit hair. Face it so that it's going back against the hook. Now, I've got to figure out which way I want to do this, which is the easiest. Tie it in where the tail left off. And then bring your thread forward. And you're going to anchor your eyeball next. I use barbell eyes because this is a weighted fly. And I put little orange ones on it. You can put almost any color that you like on it. I've done green, I've done yellow. Today I did orange. Use a bit of cement to help anchor the barbell eyes. And then you do a figure 8 around the barbell eyes to hold them on. You need to secure them because they're fairly heavy and they'll fall off if you don't, or they'll move around. So figure 8 around them. All right, then you start putting your cross-cut strip forward, making the body. All right, tie it off just behind the eyeballs. And don't get it in your nose like I did. There you go. Wrap the thread good around the end of it. Build it up just a bit so that it's more even with the eyeballs. Do some more tying on the eyeballs to help secure them just a little bit more. And then you tie it off. I tie it off behind the eyeballs, half hitches. About 3 or 4 half hitches. thread, and I use a little bit more head cement. I like to make sure that this is as secure as possible since it's such a heavy fly.
Hi, I'm Rod Grant. I'm from Vancouver, Washington, and I'm here to tie a fly that I came across due to medical reasons. My knees got so old I couldn't scramble up and down the banks of the Deschutes River anymore, and Lacamas Lake was 10 minutes away from the house, so I started tying bass flies. And I proceeded to come up with this. It's an imitation, it's a fly tyers imitation impression of a spinnerbait that the lure tossers cast for bass all the time. And works really, really well, and I'm here to share it with you. The hook, the hook I'm using is a stinger hook. This is a 3/0, and you can use any size, of course, you want to. But I like 3/0 to 5/0. Bass like large flies. And it's a 3/0 wax thread. Going to have a rattle chamber on this, as well as a weed guard. So the first thing I'm going to put on is the weed guard. The bass like something with movement. They like a lot of flash, and they like to hide in the brush. And this weed guard becomes absolutely necessary when you're fishing the kind of structure that large bass like to hang out in. Small bass, small fish are also in that same cover, so naturally a big bass doesn't have to expend too much energy to get where he needs to go. I use lead eyes on this. This is the biggest barbell type lead eye that I've been able to find. That provides the weight, gives it a real good jigging action, and I'm figure eighting these eyes onto the hook. And when these bass hit them hard, I'm going to put a little drop of super glue on several different areas of this fly. The weed guard as well as the eyes. Now I'm going to put a little drop of super glue on the hook shank right behind the eyes for the rattle chamber. Let that sit for a little bit. If I put it on too soon, the rattle chamber is going to slide right off the back side of that fly, and that's not too sweet. This is pine squirrel. This has been dyed and stripped. It comes from Wapsie Fly Company. It's the only place I've been able to find it. So if you need this stuff, go to your fly shop and tell them what you want. But this is pine squirrel. It's been stripped zonker style. It also comes cross-cut stripped. And this is really, really nice for these bass flies, especially in these smaller sizes like I'm using. Has a lot of movement in the water, and it seems to be denser than the rabbit that everybody's been using for fur for many years. It's very, very dense. And the super glue, of course, being underneath everything before it dries, it's going to help hold this fly together really, really well. So I put that piece in. I want 2.5, 3 times the length of the shank for my tail. And there's my tail. Next I tie in the body material that I'm going to wrap around. And I tie it in with the hide side towards me, and I tie it from the tip of the strip rather than the butt of the strip, and it will act more like crosscut. When I wrap it, it's going to fall to the back almost like a crosscut strip would do. I'm going to use a chartreuse body for this. This is ice chenille. this large ice chenille. Put that on the rear of the hook. And I'm almost ready to wrap everything forward. Now it's time to put that rattle chamber on top. Super glue has set up enough that I can set it there without my fingers being glued forever to the hook. And at the same time, it'll sit there. I'll put some more super glue on there and put some thread wraps across the top to keep it on there forever. So, a little more super glue. Just a little dab. Go over the top. Semi-firm. If I pull too hard on it, I'm still going to pull that rattle chamber off the hook. There's going to be fur and chenille going over the top of that also, depending on what pattern I'm tying. And it'll get held down real well. Now the spinner blade. The spinner blade is made from, I've got 40-pound monofilament line here, and I put it in my vise, and as I pull the line towards me, I make a slip knot, which forms a loop and a knot that slides, and I put the mylar, there's 15 to 20 strands of mylar here, doubled over. I put it through the loop, pull it back like this, and then slide that knot down really tight to hold that in place. And then I'll put a little drop of super glue on there to make sure that the mylar stays in place. I think I told you this is 40 pound. The weed guard is 40-pound monofilament. This is 18-pound flat cobra monofilament for the spinner blade. I want the spinner blade to stick up an inch and a half above the fly when I get done. I'm just tying it over the top of the eyes in the rattle chamber and pull down, and it'll lock right in there. Bring the thread over the top and the monofilament over the top of the rattle chamber, locks that in real nice. It's all super glued in place. And my chenille will pop this up into that position there. So I bring my chenille forward. Now this ice chenille, if you pull too hard on it as you're wrapping, if you pull on it like you do regular chenille, if you slide your fingers along, which I've always had a habit of doing on regular chenille, I'll slide my fingers down to where I want to grab it and I'll pull over. Do it on this, and you'll pull these little fibers of plastic out of there. So you pull it hard, hang onto it hard when you wrap, and then you've got to not slide. Make sure you don't slide your fingers along it, or you'll make bald spots, and that costs money. And wrap the whole length of the fly. Now I want to put a couple of wraps right on top of each other, right behind the rattle chamber, to build that area up so the rattle chamber isn't seen when you're done with the fly. I'm tying this off right at the back of the rattle chamber. I'll be bringing this forward more after I get everything else wrapped. Now I'll bring the pine squirrel forward with really, really wide open wraps. I'm only going to have a couple of turns on the body until I come up to that same area where I've tied everything off. I'll take an extra turn of the rabbit around the rattle chamber. And tie it off. This is where I am going to break thread. This is where I do it. Because I've got to pull hard on that hide to get it to stay put. All right? So I've got the body wrapped. Now I'm going to bring my thread forward and wrap my ice chenille. I'm going to figure 8 through the lead eyes, go over the middle, around underneath, and back through, keeping that putting this monofilament right where I want that post to be. Back underneath, back over, around, until I get a nice buggy looking body, or I run out of the ice chenille. Tie that off. All that's left now is to put the weed guard forward and to use my fancy little cautery tool. It's for cauterizing wounds, I understand. I discovered this, I was looking at a catalog and saw it, and I thought, I've got to have that. Now I really do have to have it. So I bring my weed guard forward, put my fly back in the vise. I had that weed guard back behind there so it wouldn't get in my way. And I bring the weed guard, the monofilament, right through the eye of the hook. And I want to, if I pull it too tight, I'm not going to have as much protection for that hook point. So I give it a little bit of slack. Now I'm going to tie it right down. It's still sticking up through the eye of the hook. I'm going to cut that off right on the top of the hook. And yes, if I cut it off underneath, I wouldn't have this post coming up through the eye of the hook, but that won't be there much longer anyway. So I'll whip finish. I have pieces of that ice chenille, which goes everywhere when you're trying to tie it down. And I've got that monofilament also up through the eye of the hook. And before I'm done, I will take this cautery tool, and it's battery powered, and you see it glow or not in the camera, but you push down on that, and it'll melt anything plastic it comes in contact with, including your thread. So you want to be careful. So, and it'll just do wonders with this Mylar skirt. So I'm just going to melt all of that plastic off, run it through the eye of the hook. It's really good for cleaning out the eyes. It'll do wonders on hair also. I mean, hair and fur and feathers. Anything that clogs the eye of your hook, it'll clean out. Okay, one last little bit. Now I found with this fly, if I tie the barbell eyes on like these are, it's going to turn over in the water, and it's going to, if that's still on camera, it's going to ride like this, right underwater in a nice jigging motion. And this skirt, when this skirt is falling down through the water column, this Mylar skirt, the fish just come from all over. And now it'll turn over like this, and when I'm fishing it, it's going to jig up and down. This squirrel hair here is going to move back and forward. The chartreuse is going to flash from underneath it. This is going to be moving. The skirt is going to reflect light and move also. Now, I've had fish come from all over the place just because this blade is going. It'll hit the water and start falling through the water column, and the small fish will come from 10 feet away. You can see the bluegill and the small bass coming in to investigate it. And then every once in a while you see them disappear. All of a sudden the small fish are gone, and you hang on because the big one's coming in to get it. This fly has been effective for me in lots of different styles. The Mylar blade makes it look so much more like those very successful spinner baits that the lure fishermen use. And this one had not been super glued. It allows us to enter a world of bass fishing that wasn't available to us. This is much like a lure as I can get. Rattle chamber, we got a spinner blade, got a weed guard on it. I can cast it right into the structure, and that's called a squirrel bait. Yeah, thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Bruce Bachman, and I'm a member of Southern Oregon Fly Fishers Club in Grants Pass, Oregon, and I'm up here tying at the Federated. And what I'm tying today is a marabou leech pattern tied with all marabou. The one I'm doing now is going to be a purple. We start with some nice long marabou. Blood marabou is a little bit too short. And what we're going to do is tie it in about the halfway point of the marabou. For your tail, and move your thread forward about to the midpoint of the hook. And the butts you want to rotate counterclockwise to make a little rope of marabou, and you tie that forward up to your thread point. That's your marabou body for the first segment. This is a Hal Jansen tie, by the way. I think Hal probably created this marabou pattern. We get another bunch. We tie this in so the tips match the tips of your tail section. Move your thread forward up to your tie-off point, counterclockwise. Clean off any little butts you have here. And the third bunch is going to be approximately the same size as your first two, and it's going to extend all the way back to your tail length also. This is a quick fly to tie, simple, and yet very effective for still water fishing. You can tie it with a bead head or lead weight or unweighted. Unweighted works real good in the real slow waters of lakes or slow parts of rivers. And there's your fly.
I'm Scott Richmond. I'm going to tie an approximate damsel. This is a pattern from Jeff Morgan. Jeff writes the fly tying column on westfly.com, www.westfly.com, nonprofit website for Western fly anglers. Jeff's a very clever guy, and when he looks at flies and designs flies, he figures out what it is the trout are really looking for. And in damselfly nymphs, he says there's 3 keys to an effective damselfly, and I agree with him on all 3 points. One is motion. If you look at a real damselfly, it wiggles. It goes like this all the time. And another one is big eyes, and a third key is sparse. A real damselfly nymph is extremely thin. Most commercially available damselfly patterns, like marabou damsels, I think look more like the leech patterns than a damselfly nymph. But I found the approximate damsel to be a very easy tie and extremely effective. And I start off by debarbing the hook. Just pinch the barb down, start the fly. And one of the ways to get an effective motion is with a long tail. So I tie this on a fairly short hook. I wrap the thread all the way down to the bend of the hook, then bring it back to about the midpoint of the shank. Just use a tail of marabou, olive marabou, kind of a lightish olive. And I want the tail to be about the length of the hook shank, but we tie it at the midpoint. You could use a shorter hook, but that would put the hook point too far from where the fish might go after it. This way the hook is more in the middle and you get a better setup on the hook. Trim the marabou off so that you don't have a lot of marabou going up on the shank, because you want to keep the body thin. And put just a little bit of fine copper wire on here. This helps keep the back down. And then just a little bit of marabou, flashabou, pearl flashabou. That flashabou is going to go down the back. Makes for just a little bit of extra translucence, a little bit of sparkle in the water. Use dubbing about the same color as the tail. You really want just enough dubbing to cover the thread and provide a little bit of fuzz. Keep it really sparse. A real damselfly nymph is very, very thin. Now don't wrap it all the way to the head. Wrap it from about the midpoint to just a little bit behind where the head is. You need to leave room for the eyes. Pull the flashabou over the back. There should really be about 2 or 3 strands there. I've lost some. Wrap it with the wire. And bend it down. Now at this point, this is where I tie the eyes in. Remember that the big eyes are one of the 3 keys to an effective damselfly nymph. I like eyes that have a little bit of a translucent look to them. Tied down, figure 8. You look at the real damselfly nymphs. They got big eyes. They really stick out. And then a little bit of olive dyed partridge. Just pull some fibers off to use for legs. The legs go from just behind the eye back to where the tail is tied in. It helps to cement those eyes down. I didn't bring cement. Lost them. Trim the legs off up by the head. Give it a couple of wraps to hold it down. little more dubbing to form the head. And again, it's good to keep it thin. You can always put a few more wraps on, but if you make it too thick, there's nothing you can do. Wrap behind the head, over where the legs went in, figure 8 around the eyes. Come up to the front. Give it a whip finish right behind the head. And the legs aren't a little messy on the right side, but that's the pattern. You can see the big eyes sticking out to the sides. That tail will wiggle nicely in the water and be very attractive to the trout. And that's it, Approximate Damsel from Jeff Morgan, tied by Scott Richmond.
Hi there, I'm Charlie Shalinsky from Ukiah, California. I'm a member of the Russian River Fly Fishers down in California. I live right on the Russian River, and I do a lot of trout fishing. Today I want to tie a fly for you that I call the parasol midge, and I have one in the vise at this time. And it's really an effective fly for when fish are bulging, the flies haven't quite started coming out. And I tie it also in a blue wing olive and a pale morning dun. I tie it in a calabatus. I do quite a few different flies in this style of fly. It's extremely effective on streams and in lakes, and it can be tied with all sizes. I tie the parasol midge in everything from about a size 12 all the way down to a 24. I'll start off by explaining how it's tied. First of all, I have to take a piece of monofilament, and I've tied a loop in it with a cinch knot. Then I take a piece of Antron yarn, just a simple piece of Antron, and I slip it into that loop, and I pull it tight. And if everything works well, it'll come right on down and tighten up. Then I cut off the excess off of that loop, and then I'm going to place this in the vise. When I place it into the vise, and I slightly tighten it up, and then I pull it tight up against the vise jaws. And the reason for that is I'm going to tie a hackle around that. And this is what's going to suspend the fly in below the film. And I take and I just wrap thread around, just as if you were tying onto a hook shank. At this point, it's pretty simple. Clip off your extra. Now I need to get a hackle. It's of the correct size, and this is pretty liberal. You don't have to be exact. The smaller the fly, the smaller the hackle. The larger the fly, the larger the hackle. And you prepare the fly just like you would any other hackle, and you tie that on to that slight post you've done. Now here is where you might be a little bit different. I use Adoran hackle pliers. You can use any hackle pliers you want. I found the only thing that you can't do in fly tying is tie a fly that falls apart. If you're tying commercially, customers don't like it. Now I just wrap that hackle around just like you would a normal hackle. And then I'm going to tie it off, and the way I tie hackles off is I don't bind down the the stem to a hook shank, I wrap through the hackle in this manner. Oops, I pulled it right out of the, whoa, it broke. My monofilament broke. I'm going to have to retie another piece. I don't know if you want to stop the cameras right now for a second. Keep going, okay? And that's exactly what I'll do. I'll just keep going. I'm going to tie another one. It only takes a second to tie this. I'm tying a cinch knot. Pull it around. That's the first time I've had that happen to me. And like they say, when you're on camera, what can go wrong will go wrong. I think these guys work for Murphy, and they have Murphy's Law going for them. I'll take another piece of Antron, stick it into the loop, and pull it tight. Same exact thing, just start it over again. It only takes a second to do these, and when I'm tying these flies, I'll take and do 5 or 6 flies at one time, or sometimes a dozen at one time, and I get all of this portion of it done way ahead of time. The rest of the fly is tied pretty much like a regular nymph, just like you would tie at home any of the other nymphs you tie. Again, I get the feather on there. I'll grab another hackle, pull it off. In my experience in tying, I found out one thing, is anybody can be an expert. Jack Dennis from Montana, when I was talking to him one day, he says, Charlie, he says, you know, an expert is somebody who's 50 miles from home and has a slideshow. And I've watched him tie in exhibitions, and he also makes mistakes or has things break on him, and that's quite all right. It just happens to all of us. So if you're tying away and something breaks, just relax, let it go, and keep right on moving, and keep talking, and keep tying. It's a lot of fun. Excuse me for not looking up a lot, but I got to kind of watch the fly as I'm tying. And I clip off the excess hackle after I've got it wrapped on. And then I do a standard tie-off knot underneath the hackle. Bring that down, and then I pull the Antron up, and that Antron leaves you a little bit of a white post that you can see while you're fishing it. And now what I'm left with is a little parachute or parasol here. I'll set that to the side, and now I place the hook into the vise. I don't have my pliers here in front of the camera, so I can't debarb the hook, but that's, I do that prior to tying the flies in most cases. I can't remember when I haven't when I fished with a fly that isn't debarbed. Now I'm going to tie in. I tied a base thread of thread, of just plain black thread, and now I'm tying on white Antron. And this is going to represent the gills on the fly. And I tie down to the bend. I tie in front of that Antron to leave room in the eye. And I take a piece of copper wire, fine copper wire, and I tie that in. And like I say, this is a fairly simple pattern to tie, but it's extremely effective when you're fishing where areas where the fish are coming up and they're starting to feed on nymphs that are coming to the surface, and the nymphs have stopped the hatch because it's still too cold, and yet they're on the way because the water temperature itself is warm enough for them to come up to the surface. Then I have this copper rib, and I make between 4 and 5 wraps of copper rib around the fly, tying it on. And then I just tie that off. Many times I just break that copper wire when I'm tying it. I'll cut it in this case for expediency. Now I'm going to get rid of this back here, and I cut that off very short. All that's representing is gills. Then I take a single peacock herl and I tie that in. Now it's time to tie in the parasol portion of the fly, and I'll tie that on, and you can make this as long or as short as you want to have it. I would recommend you don't make it very long. I like to keep mine under an inch underneath the surface, and that's when I generally, and the surprising thing is very seldom do you ever have a fish come up and take the parasol off the top of the water. They generally will take it, and so now I can adjust that hackle, or that parasol to where I want it. And I've tied it down, and I cut off the excess. And I pull it forward to tilt it up so it stays up in the air. It looks like I have some thread coming loose here. We may have a problem with the fly, but got the idea there. Then I leave the thread back, and I wrap the peacock herl forward up to the edge of the antron, and I wrap all the way back, ending up just behind the wing or the post. And then I just wrap my thread through the peacock herl, lift up in the front, and now I tie the fly off. And then I finish off with some standard half hitches on the fly. Pull it loose, cut off the peacock herl, cut off the thread, and then form the gills on the front. And that's a completed parasol midge.
Hi, my name's Jim Ferguson. I'm a member of the NW Fly Casters in Salem, Oregon. And today I'd like to tie an Atlantic salmon pattern. It's called the Yellow Eagle. And if you look at the vise right now, you'll see a typical what we call a blind eye hook that was used for the Atlantic salmon patterns. Blind eye meaning that in the front here you had to take a gut loop and put it on yourself, that they didn't have the return loops at that time. And this hook is a fairly long one, and the eagle patterns typically were a very long-bodied fly. What I'm going to do though is of course the eagle feather is not available today for us, so we use an imitation. And a fishing eagle would be one that would be probably easier to use for the steelhead around here. And we use a little different hook. The problem with the return eye loop is that you pull real hard on this, it may give, which you don't want. So what I'm going to do is tie a fishing eagle, which uses a gamakatsu hook. And it has the end of the hook already formed on it, so that holds the line a lot easier. It does have a return loop, which leaves a slight gap which you need to close. Attach your thread. And if you're tying for a demonstration fly, you're going to spend a lot more time with the tinsel, making sure that the tinsel and the thread is laid on there nice and evenly. But for a fishing fly, you can sometimes overlook a few of those. There's a tag on this fly which is a silver twist, which is a couple strands of the silver wire that is twisted together. I'm attaching it on the far side of the hook, run the line down the shank until you're pretty much straight above the barb. And then run your thread forward, and then make about 3 to 4 turns, putting the tag on the back end of this fly. Most of the time, if you're tying for a show fly, you always tie things off on the far side, because the side I'm looking at is the side that is usually facing the viewer. For a fishing fly, you don't have to be too concerned about that. The tail of this fly is made from the red breast from a golden pheasant, and what you're after is a feather that's going to be fairly even, so that you've got just as many barbs coming out one side as the other. And you want to kind of get the nice, deep reddish colored part there. In prepping this for the tail material, you can clean off the stem, and then what you want to do is to work that feather to get those fibers down there, and then the fibers that are coming off we can just get rid of like that. And the tail, you'll want it to kind of cock upwards a little bit. Don't need a real long tail on this fly. You're just putting a little bit of color out the back. Oops. Turn off the waist. Now this one will have a double rib, so we attach the flat tinsel along the bottom underneath. Nice thing about having a rotary vise is you can move for the tire. You can move it so that it can attach materials, and you can look at all sides of the fly as you're making it. The second rib is going to be a oval silver tinsel, and we will probably reverse wrap that over the hackle to help bind down the hackle. Now the second rib I'm going to put in just behind where I attached the flat. So I've got two tinsels. One, the flat tinsel is roughly on the bottom, and the oval tinsel is on the far side. Now the body is made out in 3 parts. There's 3 colors. The first color is going to be yellow, and I'll be using yellow seal. The second color will be a scarlet seal. And the third color will be a blue seal. And then we're using the light blue. Now to put the seal on, what I'm going to do is make what we call a dubbing loop. And you take your thread, you have a dubbing hook, some people call it a shepherd's crook. Grab a hold of the thread like that, and you make this loop, go over and around to lock that loop, and then figure out roughly 1/3 of the distance that your body is going to be, and you can stop the thread at that point. I mean, that's at least, you can run the thread ahead to get it out of the way, but you want to at least visualize where that 1/3 body end part is going to be, because that's where the yellow seal is going to end. And you can make this body fairly sparse. And what I do is I stretch out the seal, open the loop, insert the seal first so it's sticking out both sides of the loop. Distribute it up and down there. So now you can see it's kind of got a nice distribution there. And then you spin this loop. And when you spin it, it makes kind of a rope out of that. If you want to sparse it up a little bit, you pull some out, and then you wrap it on just like you would as if it was a piece of wool or a piece of chenille. I like to, when I come around, draw my fingers down to pull some of the seal material back out of the way. And when you get to the end of that first body segment, tie it off. And remove the waist. Now what we have to do is put in the hackle, and for the imitation of the eagle feather, this is off of a palm turkey marabou, and it's got a lot of soft fuzz. It really moves well in the water. Now you can, there's the gray eagle, there is a red eagle, there's the yellow eagle, and basically the only difference is in the coloration of the eagle feather. You can get the gray eagle and the yellow eagle. There will be a difference in the order between the red and the blue seal fur. The way I prepare this feather is to, it's slippery, and if you don't attach it tight, when you pull on it, it'll slip right out and it can cause you some trouble. What I like to do with marabou and some of the other feathers is I'll trim down along the stem, leaving some of the spiky ends here, and that helps to hold that fiber down. Some people will attach the marabou underneath, or you can do it on top. Because of the way we're going to run the second ribbing material up through that marabou to tighten and hold it down, it's not going to make too much difference where we start. Typically on Atlantic salmon pattern, you'll quite often run a hackle up, but you'll run the hackle right up behind the oval tinsel so that the oval tinsel will protect that fiber so that it won't break. But with constructing it this way with the reverse wrap, it's really going to bind that hackle down so that if the hackle stem does break at some point, it's not going to unravel the fly on you. If marabou gets in your way while you're tying it, you can always wet it. Unless you got dry mouth. You can always wet it and pull it back out of the way. Now what we're going to do for the red or the scarlet color is the same thing. Make another loop. Take your thread up to where the second 2/3 of the body is going to end. Take the red seal, spread it out. Open the loop. Distribute the seal within that loop. Spin it, and when you spin it, you'll make your rope. Thin it out. Start the wrapping. Some people will even take some glue and they'll put it on the base of the hook right along in here. That way, as they go around, it will help hold that fur to the hook. But basically, we don't need to do that because we made the loop. And by doing that, it makes a very tight, tough, compact body. And you can, if you want to get it spikier, you can get with other patterns using a dubbing loop like this. You can go in and pick that out, make it spikier. It's not going to come undone on you. Okay, now we have to do the blue, so we make another loop. And here's where you kind of got to judge. If you didn't do too well on making 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, you got to figure out where you're going to end that fly so that you can form a head. So with the last body color, you may want to cut it off so that it's a little less than 1/3. Just want to make sure you leave enough head space. distribute the seal, and again, with your dubbing loop, spin it to make the rope. Pick out some of the fibers to make it a little thinner. Now we bring the flat rib up. And typically there's about 5 turns of tinsel, but fish don't really count too much. And if 4 works out better, or for the length of the shank of the hook, or 6, it's only when somebody's really looking at it in terms of, does this look exactly like the standard pattern? You have to worry about the number of turns. You try to make them the same distance apart. Yamakatsu hook is a little there. Okay, now I like to use this little tool here. It's like a hackle plier, but you come out and it's got a little hook thing that you can grab a hold of hackles pretty easy with. It's one that actually is used in electronics. Now, if you pull too hard, you'll break this hackle off, and then you have some interesting ways of repairing that. But you want the eagle, actually the marabou, to flow back. It gets to be a real fuzzy, fluffy fly when it's dry. Marabou, when it gets wet, will lay down pretty flat, and then as it gets tension on it and tension released, the marabou puffs back and forth, giving a lot of action in the water. Now the stem gets fairly large, and that's where you have to kind of judge where you want to end and how many wraps you can get on. Now with the return loop, this stem can actually fit into that return loop when you make some turns, and you don't have a real thick piece of that stem where your thread is holding it down. It actually goes up into that groove. That's the one nice advantage of a return loop. If you can use that to your advantage, it helps you in getting a much smaller head than you would have if it was just a normal shaft on that shank. Now, what we're going to do is reverse wrap. Now, when you reverse wrap, you've got to be careful. People with rotaries tend to, well, just turn this crank and put it on there. But when I do that, I'm unwinding this front. And that's what you have to be careful of. You got to make sure you get enough wraps up front here so that when you do go backwards and unwrap, you don't end up unraveling that stem, because then everything comes apart. And it is easier with a rotary if you can just work this through the marabou. And by reverse wrapping, I'm crossing over the stem of that marabou. And by wiggling it as you go through, it kind of pushes some of the fibers out of the way, and those that don't move, you move with your needle. Tying off something that has been reversed wrapped is something you got to pay a little more attention to, because the thread, when you go around it, when you reverse wrap something, does not tighten up on it. And so you end up having to maybe make a few extra turns at the front. And don't let go until you're sure that you've got it cinched down to where it'll hold. Now we get a collar to put on this, and the collar is Widgeon, Gadwall. If you have some real long teal, this is Gadwall here. And you can strip one side of it, or you can leave both sides and fold. This is fairly long Gadwall, so I can get by with stripping it. And I stripped the right side of the, excuse me, I stripped the left side of that feather. Now, one thing that you can do when you're pulling these, sometimes they'll slip on you. One way to keep that from happening is you can go down and then pull this back and take 1 or 2 wraps to hold that stem, so the stem goes down and then is kind of folded back and tied down. And it tends to hold in there a lot better in terms of strength. And you want to make sure that the marabou doesn't get wrapped around the body as you're putting this on. So you got to kind of stroke it and this helps keep the marabou kind of formed to the body a little bit. Pick out this feather. It sticks to itself real good, and so sometimes it'll bulk up in spots. And so by taking your needle and working it through that, you can kind of even it out and spread it out. Sometimes you'll get ones that just won't cooperate. If that happens, that's when you just pull them off. Now the wings on this fly are what we call a D-wing. And you need to have a base for them. So in this case, I'm building it up a little bit to make sure that there is a platform for those D-wings to come off of. The wing material is mottled turkey, white tip turkey works. You can vary the color. You can use brownish colors. You can just get some turkey. This is a white tip turkey. And ideally, what you would want is a section of this turkey that includes part of this white right at the tip. And so what I'm going to do is to take a section off that side. And it's a section that's just shy of about a 1/4 inch for this particular pattern. And then you do one on the other side from about the same place. Now I'm lucky on this feather. This is a center tail feather on the turkey, so I can take both my right and left from the same feather. Sometimes you'll have a right or a left, which means that this might be the good side and this side might, be real short. And then you've got to find the feather that comes from the other side of the turkey, and it'll have a good side on there and the bad side. So you'll buy them in pairs that way. If you're lucky and can find a centered one, you can get both sides of the wing from the same feather. Now wings on a D style are set a little bit differently. You'll find them, people will do them both ways. The wing usually sits flat like this, so that when you look at the fly, we're going to have the wings coming back, something like that. The ideal is to get it as flat as possible and to kind of parallel the side of the body. However, when you start trying to physically do that, you'll find that the wings will splay somewhat on you and make a V shape. Notice also that the tips, the way this feather is shaped, that the outermost part of this feather has the longest fiber. Sometimes you'll see people will reverse that. And that's kind of where it may get into just style of the tire. What I do is I turn the vise so that I can see this, because what you have to do is come down around to compress those wings against each other. And you'll see that when you put pressure down on how they want to cock up, and that's because the base is not real flat. And when that happens, you have to build up that base, flatten it out. Some people will compress the wing at the very beginning, and what they'll do is they'll wrap some thread around and make a loop around there, and in that way it will crease them together, and then they'll come back and put them on. Yeah, it's not too bad. I think that's good enough. Oops. Okay. When you're tying flies for show, tyers kind of pride themselves with who's got the smallest head on the fly, and when you're fishing, it really doesn't make that much difference. You try to want to make it look attractive, though. It's always nice if you're tying a fly, whether it's tying it to fish with or tying it for a show or whatever, to try to do the best job getting it to look like it should. This is the UTC thread. It's a very nice thread in that every time you take a loop around, the thread will put a half twist in it. And if you don't occasionally spin this to unravel it, it just gets like a rope that's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And when you're tying materials down, it sometimes is real helpful if you have a wide flat going around a round stem that wants to roll on you. And by spinning this thread, it flattens it out, and you can make quite a few more wraps without building up bulk, especially when you get towards the end, when you're forming the head. Now I've got white thread here. Some tires would change from one color of thread to another before they get to the head. Or you can get yourself some, black enamel and kind of put it on with a needle. And there's the fishing eagle.
Hi, my name is Jim Peterson, and today I'm going to tie the CDC Biot Emerger, PMD style. The hook I'm using is a CU12 by Gamatsu. Same hook made by Tiemco and same style. I like it for the Emerger style. I'm going to use pretty much PMD colors all the way through. Once you have your hook in the vise, you want to start your thread back to about where the thorax area would begin, and thread it all the way back till you're just about halfway through the bend. And bring your thread back to the front, right where you started. It's important that you take the thread back to where you are, and that you tie the materials in at your starting point, not somewhere else. The reason I do that is that if I tie material in here at the beginning of the hook, and then I decide to tie something in back here like weight or something of that nature, what happens is I have a body that has a bump in it somewhere. And when I'm using biots, well, I want a really flat body. So once you get that in, you trim off your tag in, bring your thread back to where you began, and at the same time, you can take a biot and put it in your mouth and let it begin to get softened. What I do at home if I'm tying this fly is I take a wash rag and I get it full of water, and then I wring it out real good, and then I fold it in half, and I fold it in half again. I put that on a saucer. I open it up and I put all the biots, different ones that I'm going to tie, laying on that wash rag, and then I put it in the microwave for 20 seconds, take it out, put a plate on top, another saucer on top of it, and I put that next to my tying table. So every time I need a biot, then I just reach in, grab the wash rag, open it up, and the biot's ready to go. But when we're not doing that here, so we're just basically, you can take the biot, pull it off, put it in your mouth, and let it get soft. The next step is to add a little bit of weight. This fly is a little different than most dry flies in the fact that it has weight on it, because the weight has significance in the fact, two significant factors to it. One, it weights the hook so that it makes the hook sit in the water like I want it to. And the second reason is it's an attractor or a trigger for trout. If you've ever fished for trout, which I know many of you do, the copper is really a trigger. So now what I'm going to do is tie that in right exactly where I tied in from the beginning. And I'm going to tie 3 or 4 or 5 wraps right around there. I still have a tag in. It's underneath the hook now. And to get that out of my way, what I do is just pull that wire back till it's even, and then finish tying it all the way back to where I finished my first thread wraps, which will be where the tailing is going to go. Get that back there. Once it's there, then I'm just going to move that out of my way. I'm going to go back up to the front using big wraps all the way to the beginning point. At this point, I want to tie in my trailing shuck. And for the trailing shuck, what I'm going to use is Zelon. Other materials that you might use in place of Zelon would be Antron, CDC, anything that traps air bubbles. Again, this is something that is an attracting sequence for the trout. They see that with little air bubbles in there. They know that that trailing shuck has come off, and it's a trigger that food is ready to eat. So what we're going to need now is 3 or 4 of these to get a small strip of Zelon. Here I'm using olive Zelon. You can use pretty much any color you want that matches what you're trying to do, or a lot of times what I use is just plain like a silver looking clear Zelon, which works well. Get several of them, pull them apart until you get 4 or 5 there. If you have 6, that's all right too. You can always pull those out. Tie this in at the beginning where the thorax area is. Just use a pinch wrap, get it on top of the hook. Rather than tie underneath the hook like we did the weight, what I want to do here now is I want to lay this Zelon right on the top. So I'm going to make large wraps through, pull that Zelon back, and I'm going to tie it right on the top. And how I keep it on the top is I rock that thread or the Zelon towards me, and as the thread tension comes across, then it'll lay it right on top of the hook. I go right back, right where I tied off the copper. Let my thread hang a little bit, cut off the tag ends at the thorax area. So it looks similar to that. Now I need a measurement, and basically the measurement that I want would be 1.5 times the length of this hook from the beginning of the eye to the last bend. So basically I'd have to wrap it all the way around the hook to exactly figure out how it was. But a quick measurement that works and seems to be a good point is about right there. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that part out. That's pretty simple. Pull that back out of your way, and you got it. Now we're going back, unwind, and go back right at the end where we tied everything in. And at this point, I'll put a knot, a little half hitch right here. And you'll see me do this several times during the makeup of the fly. And the reason I do that, if I don't have a half hitch, I'll show you. If I lay my thread over like that and I'm going to add material, look what happens to my thread. I have no control. And the same thing, if I have a half hitch in it, back in the back here, I own the thread. In other words, I can do what I want with it. So it's a very good little tool to use, or a step to learn when you're tying is do that little half hitch in where you're getting ready to tie in material and you'll own your thread. The biot now is ready. I'm going to tie the biot in. If you look at the biot, I don't know if you can see that or not, but if you look at the biot, there's a little notch when I hold the rounded edge toward me, the oval edge towards me, there's a little notch. I want that always pointed to the back if I don't understand which side I'm trying to do. So if that notch is to the back, that means I'm going to wrap that biot in the correct way. I'm going to put that biot at an angle right back here where I tied in, and I'm only going to tie in just a small amount. I go across it one time just to trap it, a little bit of thread tension, and I'm going to pull that biot up just a little bit, straighten it out just a little bit like that. And then I'm going to add a little more pressure as I go around, tighten up my thread a little bit, and I'm going to go right back up to where the thorax area started, right there. At this point, I'm not going to put a knot because I'm going to make sure that I can tie that biot in. I forgot my hackle pliers, so I'll do it this way. I'm going to let that biot go right around. Just follow itself right around. And you'll see that it makes a very nice segmented body as we go around. Just follow it right around, keeping it next to the leading edge until I get all the way around. Get right back there, get my thread back. And do maybe one more, if I'm lucky. There we go. I'll trap that with my thread one time. I now have the body in. Very tricky maneuver by hand. but it works. So you probably wonder what they did before they had all the hackle pliers and things. Now I have the body put in. I'm going to just tie the rough edges down, walk back over it a little bit till I'm right about there, just about where we started. Put a knot, and as you can see, it makes a nice little segmented body. And you can make your biots come in many different colors, so you can make up your emergers any way you want. They come in trico, black, white, different colors. Oftentimes I'll tie a white biot on, and I'll use red instead of copper, and it just makes another trigger. Now I take that copper, and I'm going to follow that biot right around and rib it at the same time. I'm ribbing it, but I'm also adding weight to it, which is exactly what I wanted to do. And it makes a nice looking body. Bring that right over, bring it up here, and I'm going to trap that lead once in the back, twice in the back, copper once in the front, and just pull it straight off. Breaks off nice and easy. Wrap down anything that's right there, and at this point I'll tie a knot. Now I have the body, the abdomen is made. I need to make the thorax area, have the tailing in as the tailing shuck. I'm going to straighten up my hook a little bit so it's a little flatter, easier to work with. And for this, I need to tie a little thorax area in, so I'm going to bend my hook over just a little bit, and I'm going to open my thread up. However you dub it is your way of doing it, if that works for you. I dub almost everything I do with an open thread rather than a thread loop or putting dubbing on like you might normally do it. And here we won't need a lot of dubbing, but I'll get that thread open first. We're just going to have just a small amount of dubbing. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be a little bit. It should be a little bit darker than what you're using for the abdomen part. So I'm going to let that thread open just a little bit. If you turn it let your thread turn counterclockwise, what will happen is your thread will open up. I'm tying with power silk, which comes from England, which basically gives me the ability to pull on it and do all kinds of things without breaking it. It's size 8, so it's very strong and very durable. And it can be used for a lot of different applications, but I really like this type of thread. So once I have it so that it's open, and any thread you use, whether it's uni thread or Guterbrod or whatever it might be, if you swing your bobbin to the right, counterclockwise, it'll open your thread up. At that point, what I'm going to do is put a flat surface against it. I take this little tool, and you can use your bodkin too, and I'm just going to split that thread just like that. Open it up. So you can see now I opened up that thread. I'm going to take my dubbing, and I'm just going to insert it right inside there. Let go of it. Now I have caught the dubbing. I'm going to wind it just a little bit to kind of close up the thread, but before I go much further, I'm just going to trim it because I know that's much too long, what I need. So I'm just going to trim it up a little bit. Nothing fancy in this point. Move it up, kind of pack it a little bit. I need very little dubbing, and that in itself is way too much dubbing, but we're going to take care of that. So we'll spin it clockwise, and now it'll tighten up the thread, and as it does, it starts to kink the dubbing. See how it's starting to kink in there? Once you see that, stop it and start thinning out your dubbing. This one has a little guard hair material put in it, so I'm going to take some of those out. I don't really need those. And I'm just going to thin it out. And I'm going to thin it out to the point that it looks like I don't have any dubbing on there hardly at all. But actually there's quite a lot. Then again, I'll take my scissors, go next to it. Just trim that dubbing a little bit shorter. If you ever had trouble dubbing a fly, you can really do a good job with this. You can dub anything you want, and then you can just take your scissors and make the abdomen or the shape that you want it to be, which is much easier than trying to put it on the other way. So I just kind of push that up a little bit. Got a little bit more right there than I need. Pull it out. Now at this point, the thorax is going to be more of a bump than anything else. I just kind of make it right in here. The dubbing that I'm using for this is an olive color with a little flash in it. Now you can use anything you want in here that you prefer. So now like I said before, it's a little buggier than I want it to be, so I'll just trim it up a little bit until it appears to be about what I want it to be. And if it's a little shaggy, that's okay too. Thoraxes tend to be a little shaggy most times. Trim that up. That'll work. Once I have that there now, I'm going to walk my thread forward, being careful to put one right after the other. Now, as I said in the beginning of the fly, when I tied in right at this thorax area, and I did that on purpose because at some point in every fly, no matter what fly you're constructing, you're going to get to the front end of the fly. So it really doesn't matter. The smaller the hook, then that means the less thread that you want to put on that hook, because the more you put on it, the bulkier it gets and the harder it is to wind up with a nice finished product. So I have it now right at the eye, and this is where I'll be tying in my winging material, which is CDC. Now I do something here that all of us have a problem with or have experienced at one time or another. You were in the field on the stream, hands were cold, and you were trying to put on an elk hair caddis, and you couldn't get the tippet through the eye because you couldn't find the eye. So what I decided to do was I put about 4 wraps right on top of each other, 4 or 5 wraps right at the eye, build a little bump right at the eye, and then I'm going to put a half hitch directly behind it. Now the reason I did that was, first of all, I just moved my thread from directly behind the eye over towards the back end of the fly. So now I've opened up the eye, basically. So when I put material on top of this fly and I pull it down on top of the shank, what's going to happen is the thread's going to come down with the material. It's going to hit that thread bump, and it's going to bounce itself backwards towards the abdomen, so that when it actually sets down, I'm going to have an open spot there, so I'll never have a problem getting this thing threaded. That's why I do that. Next thing we do is we're going to mount the wing, and for the wing what I'm going to use is olive CDC, because I want the wing just a little bit darker. So I take 2 CDC feathers and fan them out. Don't be afraid to work with CDC. CDC is the greatest material out there, and there's so many things you can do with it. But most people are afraid to work with CDC because they think it's real fragile, and in one sense it is, in another sense it's not. So I'm going to get a couple of feathers those are a little large, so maybe I'll try a couple of smaller ones for this fly. A couple that are pretty similar in size, and I'm just going to stroke them back, kind of clean them up a little bit, just like you would do the barbulas on any hackle. The long stuff I'll pull off in the back until I have it basically looking like that. I'll just lay it down. Try another one, do the same thing, just open them up. Just like you were dealing with a good whiting hackle or whatever you're using. So that I have 2 of them, which are going to make up the wings. Now this emerger is actually setting in the film, the meniscus, and it's setting with its wings together like this. It's setting in the meniscus, waiting for the oxygen to come up into those wings so they can fold back and open up. So I need to tie these together. If you look at the CDC feather, like all feathers, it's concaved and it's bent inward or outward, either way you want to look at it. If I were tying this fly had the wings that were already formed and ready to go, then I would tie them backward like this with the wings tilted out. What I'm going to do is make it like a praying motion. I'm going to put these together so that these wings are basically locked together. The trout understand when they look up and they see this insect sitting on the water, first of all, this is prime food. Nothing has happened yet to make this thing burn any energy. It's as large as it's going to be, and the second part of it is it can't get away. So the trout really trigger on this fly sitting on the surface. Now I need to get these 2 wings, these 2 pieces of CDC together. And if you look at this, hold the CDC, once you put them together, facing each other, if you hold it away from you in the light, you can see that they're not even. And if I pull them up and down like that, you can see how that moves. I don't know if you can see that on the camera or not, but you can see that one's longer than the other. And that's just by moving my index finger and thumb together. And I'm going to line them up to where they're even, just like that. That's what I want. transfer it to my left hand. Now that I have this wing material basically where I want it, they're even. I'm not going to need a lot because I'm using a size 16 hook. Now I would tie this fly down to size 18, even to size 20, although I wouldn't fish a size 20 because I can't see it. But size 18, most of the time I can see it. I'm only going to need a small amount of winging material. So basically about half of my size of my finger I'm going to grab like that. So that now I've transferred it to this hand. I'm going to reach over and grab that material, preen it backwards, the stuff that I'm not going to use. Just preen it back until I have that. And that's quite a bit of material. So I'll just preen a little bit more back until I got it about like that. That's a little bit better. And don't be afraid to fluff it around until you got it. I basically have these two CDC feathers laying side by side so that they look like that, like a tomahawk almost. Now to get this going, what I'm going to do to form the wing is I'm going to grab it and I'm going to preen these feathers forward and push my hand together real tight, my fingers, until it looks like that. So basically I have drawn those two feathers together, and if I show you what that looks like, it looks like that. So I've taken it from that, and how do I get that wing down so I can tie it in? I just basically squeeze it together and pull them until I'm about where I need to be. I'm going to set that on top of the hook, and I'm tying in behind the eye, and I'm going to put it on with my right hand, but my left hand basically is going to hold the material on top. And it's very important that the material wind up on the very top of the shank, the hook shank. If you're tying material on top of the hook shank, the way you keep it on there is not keeping your fingers like this, like an M, which would be inverted. Say the hook shank was between my fingers like that. It would be open, so the material as I pulled it down would slide right through, right around the hook. If I want to stop that, I close it up and make a V. So I'm going to close it up right around that hook shank and hold the material on top of the hook and do a pinch wrap and pull it right on top of the hook. I'm going to set it there, transfer my hand. Got to have a little more wing to do that though. Okay, set it right there. I'm going to transfer hands now. Right there. Now I'll do my pinch wrap up here. Bring it down easy until I feel it set on that hook. Come back with another one. Notice how I set that right on the top of that hook. If it's setting off a little bit, I'll just pull it over a little. I'll show you how to straighten that up. I'm going to walk that right across the top of that shank, right back to the thorax, just like so. And just cut it off at an angle right across the top of that thorax. Now I know that some of this is kind of like sitting a little bit off kilter here. So the way I can fix that is I just make one or two big wraps right back to the back of that area, and I'm going to grab that material, the winging material, together in my hand, pull it straight back, pull it towards me a little bit, and I'm going to wrap that thread right up under it like so, and set that wing right where it belongs. Now it's sitting right on top of the shank. Not a problem. Perfect. There we go. That'll work. Then I'll go right back to the thorax area and drop my thread. So now you can see that I have that the wing material right where I want it to be, and it's, even though it's behind the hook eye, it's not crowding the eye to the point that I won't be able to fix it. The last thing I need to do on this fly is put in a piece of hackle, a small hackle here, and it can be usually either the same size as the hook you're using or about 1/2 times larger, so 1.5 times the normal size, not 1.5 times, but hook size plus half. And this one's a little bit larger here, and I'm using a pale morning dun hackle. The hackle itself really serves no purpose because there's no legs involved in this, although it could have legs. What this hackle does is I'm going to tie it in like an umbrella. If I look at this hackle, just like I looked at the CDC, it's concaved on one side. The shiny side is always up, and it's like a concave like that. If I put shiny side back, then I would have the concave facing the front of the fly. Since this hook is going to be setting in the water straight up and down, not like this, like that, a normal hook, it's going to be setting like this in the water. I need to build an umbrella on it that when that fly hits the water, it sets itself just like that. With the combination of the CDC and the hackle, it's going to float. So now I just straighten up, pick out a hackle that I want. Strip it off a little bit. And I'll explain how I tie this in also, which is important. So I'm going to put the dull side to the back of the fly. What I do is I just lay this hackle. I got my thread right back to the thorax area. I lay it right in. I go across it one time. So now I have that hackle in there. I can do basically whatever I want with it. So I'm just going to kind of straighten it out about like that. The important part about tying in a hackle correctly is that if I just tie it in now and don't pay attention to what I'm doing, if we've ever, many of us, I know you fished a fly that fell forward on itself and fell on its face, or basically right on the eye. Never got a hit until you saw it come by and it was setting on its face. And the reason it did that is you constructed that part, this portion of your fly, the hackling part, wrong. So if you tie it in like this, like I'm telling you, and then you do the next step, the stem itself starts very thin at the top, and it graduates larger until it's all the way down here. So basically what I'm going to put in here is a shim, and I'm going to use the stem to do that. So once I've gone across it and I've kind of straightened out my hackle, I'm going to go in front of the tag end of the hackle on the bottom, and I'm going to come back across behind the hackle on top. See, now I can pull that hackle where I want it. Now look what happened to that hackle. I straightened it up, and I'm going to go right in front of it. Then I'm going to grab the hackle stem from the bottom, and notice how I'm pulling that hackle forward. I can even lift it up a little bit here because I want to cut it off on top. Basically what I'm doing is I'm laying smaller stem all the way to thicker stem to where the tie-off point's going to be. So that as this hackle is laid in, it's laid in, graduating a little bit larger as it goes forward because it's resting, building itself forward on the stem of the hackle. What happens with flies that fall on their face is that they start out a certain height of the hook, and they start out, and when they reach the end of the hackle, then all of a sudden they become smaller. The next one becomes smaller because the barbulas on this end of the hackle are not as long as this end of the hackle, the butt end of the hackle. Now I've got this, so this fly will never set on its face. And if you do that on all your dry flies, especially humpies and things of that nature, you'll find out that you'll never have a fly that falls on its face. So now that I'm here at the tie-off point, the other thing that happens when you tie in a hackle correctly is that whenever you hackle a fly and you get up to the end of it, how many times have you had to turn your fly over in the vise and trim off all of the little hackle barbs that stuck out? By tying it in perpendicular the way it should be, you should be able to wind that hackle forward, not pulling down the barbs as you go forward, and that's what you're trying to accomplish. Obviously, buying good hackle is the number one prerequisite, but that doesn't always mean that that's going to work either. Sometimes you kind of have to strong arm a hackle. This one looks like it's going to work pretty good. We'll see. I'll have to strong arm it here a little bit. I'm only going to need like 3.5 wraps around here. I'm going to go right back up. Now I have it where I want it to be, and if you look at the fly, I don't know if you can see it or not where I'm at here. Let me tie it off. I'm going to tie off once behind it, one more time behind it, and then I'm going to drop over in the front. Now, you notice by tying that hackle off, you see any hackle in the front? You see none, and that's exactly what you want all your dry flies to come out like. The other characteristic of by tying it in the dry, I have an umbrella effect on the top of this fly because this fly is going to set with the wing up in the air, and that's what I'm looking for. The other thing is I want this hackle up on top, so they cut it off on top, not on the bottom. So we're good to go there. Last step will be to take this fly and do a couple of half hitches on the front, like so. We tie it off. Slide your scissors through off the thread. trim it off. See a little CDC sticking out on the side there. We can just trim that back a little bit. Now we have a fly ready to fish, except for that little CDC sticking right there. Little head cement on there, and you're good to go. What'll happen to this fly, and let me show you real quick before I sign off here. This fly is going to sit in the water just like that. That's exactly how it's going to sit. I have everything to hold it. Well, maybe I do. That's how that fly is going to sit in the water, is just like that. With a trailing shuck down, the umbrella effect of the hackle is going to hold it up. The trout are going to key on the part which is the wing and the body. They're going to realize that this is free food, the best. This is prime rib. They're going to go for it. And this fly, again, tie it in any buyout color that you choose to match any hatch, and you'll be good to go. And that would be the PMD Bayet CDC Emerger.
Doing soft tackles are probably one of the harder things for people to do because they can't get the right size feathers. And you buy your feathers, they're usually too long. I'll show you a short trick to be able to take and do a soft tackle using a longer feather, getting it down to size. After we rub our thread base, we trim our base. We'll take our partridge or wood duck or hen or whatever it is, we trim it back just a little bit like this. We trim it back. We'll tie it in at the length twice the shank of the hook. The shank of the hook, so the barbs on there are about twice as long. So we'll tie that feather in back further than you normally would a normal hackle up on the front. We'll just tie it in there, trim off the butt, take the hackle pliers, and we'll wrap that hackle in there. Whenever you buy them hackles in the store, they've already picked through them, especially whenever you get them by a bag. So you're better off if you get a skin, and you can get the browns, the grays that you want. And it doesn't matter about the length because you'll see how this works. Take a couple of turns on the hackle, snip off the excess, bring all them fibers forward like that. They've all been brought forward, and lash them down. Now the thread I'm using is a real thin floss. It's made by UTC. It's called Ultra Thread. And as I'm wrapping that barbs down, I'm making sure they're going all the way around the hook. Once I get up to the front of the hook, then the Ultra Thread that I've been using to tie down with becomes my body material. And I can wrap that body material around and make a tapered body on that fly, make it nice and soft. It's got a good taper to it. Comes right up behind like that on the head. So then I've got my green body. I use a little bit of water, rabbit dubbing, take and dub it on the thread, take that thread, take it right up in behind those hackles. With the end of my finger, I push those hackles straight back, push those hackles straight back, push them straight back until I can capture them with my other hand. I capture them with the other hand. I've got all the hackles laid back. I take that turn right up against the eye of that hook, take a few turns, do my whip finish. Now what I've done is I've made a quick, simple, soft hackle in about 2.5 minutes. I use feathers you normally throw away because they're too stinking long. You don't know what else to do with them. You put them in a package, you put them in a box, you put them away, you never use them. So with this method, by starting the hackle further back, wrapping it forward, and then folding it back again, you get the hackle length that you want for the size of the hook you want. I hope this works well for you. Use any color of threads that you want. Ultra thread works best for me. Oranges, creams, greens, yellows. Soft hair patterns and hare's ear and pheasant tail also work good. So tight lines and screaming reels. Thank you for attending.